The grand assembly hall of the Zephyrian Military Academy stretched before them like a monument to tactical superiority. Holographic battle displays flickered along the curved walls, showcasing centuries of Zephyrian victories across 17 star systems. The air itself seemed to hum with the weight of military tradition and, let's be honest, more than a little arrogance. Commander Veltar stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing with practiced precision as he addressed the gathered crowd. Each of his limbs moved independently, operating multiple data displays simultaneously, a feat that never failed to impress the lesser species. His violet skin gleamed under the Academy's artificial suns, and his three eyes tracked every movement in the amphitheater with predatory focus. Esteemed colleagues, Veltar began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a debate. Today we address a critical gap in our tactical database: the human military response patterns and their limitations. The word limitations rolled off his tongue with the satisfaction of someone about to prove a particularly obvious point. Around the hall, representatives from the galaxy's finest military minds nodded in agreement. The Crow Knights, with their insectoid features and hive mind efficiency, clicked their mandibles in synchronized approval. Admiral Flux Era of the Aquari delegation rippled through several shades of blue, her water-based form expressing amusement through color changes that translated roughly to "this should be entertaining." Scattered throughout the tiered seating, cadets from dozens of species took careful notes on their quantum tablets. The Zephyrians sat with perfect posture, their multiple arms allowing them to record, analyze, and cross-reference simultaneously. The Kronite cadets moved in perfect unison, their collective intelligence processing information faster than any individual mind could comprehend. Even the Aquari students flowed through their specialized atmospheric suits with fluid grace. And then there was the human. Marcus Kane occupied a corner seat in the back row, so unremarkable that most of the assembly had forgotten he was there. While other species displayed their natural advantages, Marcus simply sat with his single pair of arms folded, his two eyes focused on a small notebook, occasionally jotting down observations with an actual physical pen. No quantum processing, no hive mind networking, no telepathic abilities, just one human, taking notes the way his ancestors had done for millennia. Commander Veltar's gaze swept across the assembly, pausing briefly on the human before dismissing him entirely. After all, what could one primitive bite possibly contribute to a discussion about military tactics between superior civilizations? Today, Veltar continued, we will analyze the predictable nature of human warfare and demonstrate why their emotional responses make them fundamentally unsuited for modern military operations. Marcus Kane looked up from his notebook for just a moment, made another small notation, and returned to his writing. Nobody noticed the slight curve of his lips. Commander Veltar activated the main holographic display with a flourish of his upper right arm, while his lower left manipulated data streams and his remaining limbs gestured for emphasis. The first image materialized above the assembly, a three-dimensional battlefield analysis showing human forces in what appeared to be a chaotic retreat. Exhibit A. Veltar announced with the confidence of someone presenting irrefutable evidence. The Battle of Kepler Station. Human forces abandoned their defensive positions when faced with a mere 15% casualty rate. Any rational military force would have maintained position until at least 40% losses. The alien cadets murmured their agreement, styluses scratching against tablets as they recorded this obvious example of human inadequacy. The Zephyrian students nodded with four-armed superiority, while the Aquari cadets shifted through approving shades of green. General Crix Tan rose from his position among the Kronite delegation, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. When he spoke, his voice carried the mechanical precision of the hive mind, each word perfectly synchronized with his species' collective consciousness. Commander Veltar raises an excellent point about human emotional instability. Crix Tan clicked, his mandibles adding percussive emphasis to each syllable. Our analysis indicates that humans make tactical decisions based on feelings rather than mathematical probability. They retreat to save lives rather than achieve objectives. They advance to protect comrades rather than secure strategic advantage. This emotional contamination renders them Unpredictable in the worst possible way. A wave of clicking approval rippled through the Cronite section. Their hive mind had processed this conclusion through millions of networked intelligence nodes, so obviously it must be correct. Admiral Flux Era's form shimmered as she prepared to contribute, her aqueous body shifting from blue to authoritative purple. The General speaks truth, but I would argue that human unpredictability is not merely emotional, it is tactically suicidal, she bubbled through her translation device. Our telepathic reconnaissance has revealed that humans often make decisions that defy logical analysis. They charge into certain death. They sacrifice strategic positions for individual soldiers. They refuse surrender even when mathematically defeated. Her color shifted to what could only be described as condescending yellow. This is not adaptability, colleagues. This is mental instability masquerading as military doctrine. More holographic displays materialized, human forces at the siege of Terra Gamma apparently throwing away tactical advantages to rescue wounded soldiers. Human defenders at Proxima Base, continuing to fight long after any rational species would have negotiated surrender. Human fleet movements that seemed to prioritize protection of civilian transports over military assets. Each example drew more approving murmurs from the alien assembly. The evidence was overwhelming, the conclusion inevitable: humans were simply too irrational for effective warfare. In his corner seat, Marcus Kane continued taking notes, occasionally pausing to tap his pen against his lips in what appeared to be thoughtful consideration. None of the superior alien minds bothered to wonder what the primitive human might be thinking about their analysis. If they had looked more carefully, they might have noticed that Marcus wasn't frowning in concern or nodding in defeated agreement. Instead, his expression suggested someone trying very hard not to laugh out loud at a particularly amusing joke. Commander Veltar's three eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver a killing blow to an already defeated argument. His upper arms gestured dramatically while his lower hands manipulated the holographic controls, conjuring a detailed three-dimensional model that filled the center of the assembly hall. "Distinguished colleagues," he began, his voice carrying the theatrical weight of impending triumph, "theoretical analysis can only take us so far. Allow me to present a practical scenario that will demonstrate, beyond any mathematical doubt, the fatal limitations of human military capability." The hologram materialized into breathtaking detail, a mining colony perched on the edge of an asteroid field, its industrial structures gleaming against the backdrop of space. Defensive positions, supply routes, communication arrays, every tactical element rendered with Zephyrian precision. "Behold, Mining Station Epsilon 7, Veltar announced, his voice dropping to the tone professors used when explaining elementary concepts to particularly slow students. A typical human outer rim installation, 500 human defenders, standard Colonial Defense Force equipment, and exactly the kind of emotional attachment to civilian populations that we have been discussing." The image shifted, and suddenly the peaceful mining station was surrounded by what could only be described as a nightmare made manifest. Massive ships, angular and predatory, filled the space around the colony like metallic sharks circling wounded prey. "The Xerath invasion fleet," Veltar continued, and even his supremely confident voice carried a note of respectful fear. 50,000 warriors of the galaxy's most feared military force. Each Xerath stands 12 feet tall, encased in bio-integrated armor that has never been penetrated by conventional weapons. Their exoskeletons can withstand direct plasma cannon fire. Their reflexes operate at superhuman speeds. Their battle experience spans 3 millennia of constant warfare. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the alien assembly. Even species that considered themselves militarily superior gave the Xeraths their due respect. The holographic display zoomed in to show individual Xerath warriors, towering creatures that looked like someone had crossed a mantis with a tank and then given it anger management issues. General Crixtan's mandibles clicked with approval. "The mathematical analysis is quite straightforward," he buzzed through his translation device. 100 Xerath warriors for every human defender. Factor in technological superiority, combat experience, and physical advantages, and the conflict duration calculates to approximately. His eyes flickered as his hive mind processed millions of variables, 17 minutes and 32 seconds. Admiral Flux Era rippled through shades of amused blue. The General is being generous. Our combat simulations suggest complete human elimination within the first 8 minutes. Xerath tactical doctrine emphasizes rapid, overwhelming force. They do not negotiate, they do not accept surrender, and they certainly do not show mercy to inferior species. The holographic display shifted again, showing comparative analysis charts that made the situation look even more hopeless. Xerath plasma weaponry versus human kinetic firearms. Xerath bioarmor versus human composite materials. Xerath tactical coordination versus human emotional decision-making. The humans would be defending with mining equipment and construction tools, scoffed a Zephyrian cadet from the middle section, earning approving clicks from his classmates. Perhaps they could throw rocks at the Xeraths while they wait to be exterminated. Laughter rippled through the assembly, the polite, intellectual laughter of superior beings observing the obvious limitations of their inferiors. Even the normally stoic HFY cadets shifted through shades of condescending amusement. Commander Veltar raised his upper right hand for silence, though his 3 eyes sparkled with satisfaction at the response. Indeed, the scenario presents an excellent case study in human tactical limitations. Faced with impossible odds, burdened by emotional attachment to non-combatants, and equipped with inferior technology, human forces would inevitably resort to their typical pattern of irrational behavior. They would probably try to negotiate, added another alien cadet, prompting more laughter. Or attempt some foolish heroic charge, suggested another. Mathematics does not lie, colleagues, Veltar concluded with the finality of someone closing a textbook after proving a theorem. This scenario represents the logical endpoint of human military doctrine. Extinction through emotional decision-making and technological inadequacy. The assembly nodded in unanimous agreement. The case was closed, the point proven, the human limitations demonstrated beyond any possible doubt. In his corner seat, Marcus Kane looked up from his notebook, pen still poised over the paper. For just a moment, his shoulders shook slightly, though from this distance it was impossible to tell if he was trembling with fear at the grim scenario, or trying desperately to suppress something else entirely. The assembly hall had settled into that satisfied silence that follows a perfectly executed academic demolition. Commander Veltar was already preparing to transition to his concluding remarks when a sound drifted from the back corner, quiet at first, it barely audible above the hum of the holographic projectors. A chuckle. It started as nothing more than a soft snort, the kind of sound someone makes when they hear something mildly amusing. But in the reverent silence of the Grand Assembly Hall, it might as well have been a thunderclap. Every head in the amphitheater turned toward the source. 300 pairs of alien eyes, compound optical sensors, and telepathic perception organs focused on the corner where Marcus Kane sat. The human was no longer looking at his notebook. Instead, he was staring at the holographic display of the Xerath invasion scenario, and he was laughing. Not the polite, intellectual laughter that had rippled through the alien assembly earlier. This was genuine, uncontrolled human mirth, the kind that starts in the chest and works its way up until it becomes impossible to contain. PFF'd, Marcus snorted, trying to cover his mouth with his hand. Sorry, just another wave of laughter hit him. 50,000 Xeraths versus 500 humans at a mining colony? The laughter grew stronger, more genuine. Marcus doubled over slightly, his shoulders shaking with barely contained hilarity. Tears began forming in the corners of his eyes as he struggled to regain composure. The alien assembly exchanged bewildered glances. Crownites clicked their mandibles in confusion, their hive minds struggling to process this unprecedented response. HFY cadets shifted through colors that had no translation in any known language, a mixture of confusion, concern, and growing alarm. Even the supremely confident Zephyrians found their four-armed composure wavering as they witnessed something they had never seen before. A human laughing at his own species' certain doom. Oh, this is good, Marcus gasped between chuckles, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. This is really good. You actually think he dissolved into another fit of laughter, this time loud enough that the acoustics of the hall carried it to every corner of the assembly. Commander Veltar's three eyes narrowed dangerously, his forearms crossing in a gesture that conveyed both authority and growing irritation. "Cadet Kane," he said, his voice cutting through the human's laughter like a plasma blade through butter. "Perhaps you would care to explain this highly inappropriate response to a serious tactical analysis?" Marcus looked up, tears of laughter still streaming down his face, and grinned at the commander with the expression of someone who had just been told the best joke of his entire life. "Oh, Commander," he said, his voice still shaking with suppressed mirth, "you have absolutely no idea what you just proposed, do you?" Marcus Kane rose from his corner seat with the fluid motion of someone who had been waiting his entire life for this exact moment. He tucked his notebook under his arm and walked down the steps toward the central floor, his grin never wavering despite the hundreds of alien eyes tracking his every movement. "Commander Veltar," he said, stopping just short of the holographic display and offering a respectful nod, "with your permission, I would like to address your fascinating tactical scenario." Veltar's three eyes blinked in sequence, a Zephyrian expression of barely controlled irritation. "But by all means, Cadet Kane, please enlighten us as to what aspect of imminent human extinction you find so amusing." Marcus clasped his hands behind his back and looked up at the towering hologram of the Xerath invasion force. "Well, first I want to thank you all for the entertainment. Truly, this has been the most fun I have had since arriving at this academy." His grin widened. "But I think there might be a small problem with your analysis." He turned to face the assembled aliens, his casual confidence a stark contrast to their growing unease. "You see, you have approached this scenario from the perspective of rational, logical species. You have calculated probabilities, analyzed technological advantages, and concluded that overwhelming force equals inevitable victory." Marcus paused, his smile becoming almost predatory. "The thing is, nobody bothered to ask what the humans would actually do in this situation." General Crick's mandibles clicked impatiently. "The mathematical certainty is irrefutable, human. Your species faces extinction in minutes." "Ah, there is that word again," Marcus said, pointing at the Krunite general. "Minutes. You keep talking about how quickly we would lose. But here is what you missed. Humans do not see 100-to-1 odds as impossible. We see them as Tuesday." A ripple of confused murmurs ran through the assembly. Marcus began pacing in front of the holographic display, his movements loose and relaxed, despite being the center of attention from 300 of the galaxy's finest military minds. "Let me give you some context from human history," he continued, his voice taking on the tone of a professor addressing particularly slow students. "Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held off an army of hundreds of thousands. Barook's Drift, 150 British soldiers defeated 4,000 Zulu warriors. The siege of Saragossa, civilians with kitchen knives held off Napoleon's entire army for months. Admiral Flux's era shifted through skeptical shades of orange. Surely those are exaggerations or myths." Marcus laughed again, shorter this time but no less genuine. "Admiral, those are just the famous ones. Human history is absolutely packed with people looking at impossible odds and saying, 'Hold my beer, watch this.'" The phrase clearly lost something in translation, as several alien species activated their linguistic processors to parse the idiom. Marcus noticed their confusion and his grin grew wider. "You see, that is exactly what I mean. You are trying to understand human military doctrine through the lens of rational species. But humans are not rational when we are backed into a corner. We get spiteful, we get stubborn, we get creative in ways that would make your tactical computers throw error messages." Commander Veltar's forearms crossed in a gesture of growing frustration. "A Cadet, spite and stubbornness are not military strategies. They are emotional responses that lead to poor decision-making." "Are they?" Marcus asked, turning back to the holographic mining colony. "Because from where I am standing, your tactical analysis just presented 500 humans with exactly the kind of challenge that makes us dangerous." You have given us civilians to protect, impossible odds to overcome, and an enemy that thinks we are going to roll over and die quietly." He pointed up at the Xerath warriors in the display. "Commander, you just described every human's favorite kind of Tuesday afternoon." The assembly had grown very quiet. Even the usually confident Zephyrian cadets were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus's casual confidence was beginning to infect the room with an emotion the aliens rarely experienced: doubt. "You calculated that these Xeraths would win because they are bigger, stronger, and better equipped," Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. "What you failed to calculate is what happens when you corner a species that thinks impossible is just another word for interesting." Marcus turned back to Commander Veltar, his grin now carrying an edge that made several aliens involuntarily lean back in their seats. "Would you like me to explain what 500 humans would actually do in your scenario, Commander? Because I promise you, it is going to be a lot more entertaining than your 17-minute prediction." Commander Veltar's silence stretched for several seconds before he gestured with his upper right arm. "Proceed, Cadet Kane. Enlighten us." Marcus turned back to the holographic display, studying the mining colony with the expression of someone examining a particularly interesting puzzle. "Right? So here is what happens in the first 30 seconds after the Xerath fleet arrives. While your tactical computers are calculating surrender probabilities, the human commander is looking at this mining station and thinking, what can I blow up?" He pointed to the industrial structures scattered across the colony. "Those are not just buildings, Commander. Those are weapons factories. Fusion cutters become plasma cannons. The industrial crushers become personnel grinders. Or refinement chemicals become the building blocks for explosives that would make a Xerath demolitions expert weep with professional admiration." Marcus began walking around the hologram, his hands gesturing as he spoke. "The mining charges alone could level half this asteroid. But humans would not just detonate them randomly. Oh no, we would spend the first few minutes of your invasion calculating exactly how to collapse specific tunnel networks to funnel your Xeraths into kill zones." Admiral Flux Era rippled through shades of concerned purple. "That would require extensive knowledge of Xerath tactical doctrine." "Which brings us to Phase 2, Marcus continued, his grin taking on a distinctly predatory quality. While the Xeraths are wondering why their first wave disappeared into a maze of exploding tunnels, the humans are studying the survivors, recording their movement patterns, analyzing their communication frequencies, figuring out how their armor articulates." He tapped the side of his head. "You see, humans have this wonderful ability to learn from immediate experience. First Xerath through the door gets killed by a mining laser. Second Xerath gets killed by the same mining laser. But now we know exactly how long it takes to burn through their armor. Third Xerath walks into a trap specifically designed around that timing." General Crixtan's compound eyes focused intently on the human. "This assumes the Xeraths would continue using the same tactics after initial losses." "Ah, but that is where human psychology gets really interesting," Marcus said, pointing at the Krunite general. "You are thinking like a hive mind, where information spreads instantly to all units. But humans fight as individuals who choose to work together. And when you threaten something a human cares about, individual initiative becomes something beautiful and terrifying." Marcus gestured toward the civilian sections of the mining colony. "Those 500 defenders are not just soldiers following orders. They are people protecting their families, their friends, their homes. Every single one of them is going to come up with their own creative way to kill Xeraths. And humans get very creative when we are angry." He began pacing again, his voice gaining intensity. "Mining colony means heavy equipment operators who know exactly how to make a fusion drill accidentally explode when a Xerath gets too close. It means engineers who can rewire atmospheric processors to flood specific corridors with toxic gas. It means maintenance crews who know every pipe, every cable, every structural weakness in the entire facility." The alien assembly was growing visibly uncomfortable. Several Zephyrian cadets had stopped taking notes entirely, their multiple arms hanging loose as they tried to process what they were hearing. But here is the really beautiful part, Marcus continued, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone. After the first Xerath attack wave gets chewed up by improvised defenses, the survivors are going to report back that the humans are fighting irrationally. That they are using equipment wrong, ignoring proper tactical doctrine, and refusing to follow predictable patterns. Marcus turned to face Commander Veltar directly. And do you know what the Xerath commanders are going to do with that information? They are going to adapt their tactics to counter human irrationality, which means they are going to start thinking like humans. A collective intake of breath rippled through the assembly as the implications hit home. Meanwhile, Marcus continued, his grin now positively wicked, the humans have spent the pause between waves turning the entire mining facility into the galaxy's most lethal funhouse. Motion sensors rigged to explosives, gravity generators reprogrammed to create crushing zones. Even the cafeteria food dispensers weaponized into projectile systems. He gestured broadly at the holographic colony. By hour 2, the Xeraths are not fighting humans anymore. They are fighting an entire environment that has been turned against them by a species that looks at mining equipment and sees weapons, looks at structural supports and sees traps, looks at impossible odds and sees Tuesday. Admiral Fluxera had shifted to a pale, almost translucent blue. This tactical approach seems chaotic. Exactly, Marcus exclaimed, pointing at her with obvious delight. It is completely chaotic. No battle plan, no coordinated strategy, no rational tactical doctrine. Just 500 humans who have decided that today would be a good day for some Xeraths to learn why you do not mess with our stuff. Commander Veltar's 3 eyes blinked in rapid sequence. Cadet Kane, you are describing mass suicide with extra steps. Marcus's laugh echoed through the assembly hall. Commander, that is what makes it so perfect. The Xeraths are going to spend so much time trying to figure out what the humans are planning that they are going to miss the most important point of all. He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes twinkling with mischief. The humans are not planning anything. They are just making it up as they go along. The silence that followed Marcus's declaration stretched long enough to make several Aquari cadets shift through nervous shades of yellow. Commander Veltar's 3 eyes remained fixed on the human. His 4 arms crossed in a gesture that suggested he was wrestling with concepts that did not fit neatly into Zephyrian tactical doctrine. Finally, Marcus clapped his hands together with the sound of someone concluding a particularly satisfying presentation. But hey, he said, his tone shifting to something almost casual, I realize this all sounds like theoretical nonsense to you. After all, why should you believe one human's interpretation of how his species would behave in combat? He gestured toward the advanced holographic systems surrounding them. Fortunately, we happen to be in the most sophisticated military training facility in the galaxy. So here is what I propose. Let us run the simulation. The alien assembly erupted into startled murmurs. General Crickstan's mandibles clicked rapidly as his hive mind processed this unexpected development. You wish to test your theories against actual combat parameters? Absolutely, Marcus replied, his grin returning with renewed intensity. 5 human volunteers, myself included, against AI-controlled Xerath forces programmed with their actual tactical doctrines and combat capabilities. Same scenario, same odds, same mining colony layout, real-time simulation with full sensory feedback. Commander Veltar uncrossed his arms, his professional curiosity clearly warring with his tactical certainty. And you believe this demonstration will prove your point about human military effectiveness? I believe this demonstration will be educational for everyone involved, Marcus said diplomatically. Though I do think we might need to adjust a few simulation parameters to make it fair. Admiral Fluxera rippled through shades of confused orange. Adjust the parameters in favor of the human defenders? Actually, Marcus said, his expression becoming thoughtful, I was thinking we might need to make it harder. The alien assembly stared at him in collective bewilderment. A Zephyrian cadet in the 3rd row spoke up, his voice carrying the incredulous tone of someone who was certain he had misheard. Harder for the humans? Marcus shook his head, his grin widening until it threatened to split his face entirely. Harder for the Xeraths. 500 humans versus 50,000 Xeraths might not be sporting enough. We might need to give the Xeraths some additional advantages, or the simulation could end up being disappointingly one-sided. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Alien cadets began chattering in a dozen different languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the volume of disbelief, outrage, and professional skepticism. Several Cronites stood up from their seats, their compound eyes fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a hive mind trying to determine if the human had suffered some form of neurological damage. Cadet Kane, Commander Veltar said, his voice cutting through the chaos with the authority of someone accustomed to restoring order. Are you seriously suggesting that 500 humans could defeat 50,000 Xeraths so decisively that the scenario would be unfair to the Xeraths? Marcus nodded earnestly. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound a bit presumptuous. Tell you what, we will stick with the original parameters. 50,000 Xeraths should be enough to make it interesting. The betting started immediately. Alien cadets began placing wagers with the enthusiasm of people who had just been offered the chance to win easy money. The odds against human survival past the first hour climbed to astronomical levels as more and more aliens added their currency to what was rapidly becoming the largest gambling pool in Academy history. Marcus watched the betting with obvious amusement, occasionally nodding approvingly at particularly large wagers against human success. When a Cronite cadet bet his entire semester allowance on human extinction within 30 minutes, Marcus actually applauded. Commander Veltar observed the growing chaos with the expression of someone who suspected he was about to make either the best or worst decision of his military career. Very well, Cadet Kane. We will run your simulation. But I want it clearly understood that this exercise is for educational purposes only. Marcus saluted with textbook precision. Understood, Commander. Educational purposes only. His grin, however, suggested that the education was going to be far more comprehensive than anyone in the Assembly currently realized. The Academy's premier combat simulation chamber hummed to life with the efficiency of Zephyrian engineering. 5 human cadets stood in the center of the cylindrical room, their bodies already beginning to shimmer as the neural interface systems established connections. Marcus Kane stood among them, no longer the quiet observer from the corner but now clearly the leader of this impossible endeavor. Simulation parameters confirmed, announced the Academy's AI in its perfectly modulated voice. Mining Colony Epsilon 7, 500 human defenders, 50,000 Xerath invasion force. Full sensory feedback enabled. Combat mortality safeguards active. Initiating scenario in 10 seconds. The observation deck above the simulation chamber was packed with every alien cadet, instructor, and dignitary in the Academy. Commander Veltar stood at the central viewing station, his 3 eyes focused intently on the holographic displays showing tactical overlays and combat statistics. The betting pool had reached levels that would have impressed professional gamblers across 17 star systems. In 5 seconds, the AI announced. Marcus looked up at the observation deck and offered a cheerful wave to the assembled aliens. Several Cronites clicked their mandibles in what might have been amusement or concern. Simulation active. The world exploded into existence around the 5 humans. They found themselves standing in the central command center of Mining Colony Epsilon 7, surrounded by the industrial machinery and civilian infrastructure that Marcus had described so confidently. Emergency klaxons wailed as massive Xerath warships materialized in the space around the asteroid, their hulking forms blotting out the stars. In the observation deck, the alien assembly leaned forward with anticipation. This was it, the moment when human military doctrine would be exposed as the emotional, irrational disaster they all knew it to be. The initial Xerath assault began exactly as predicted. Drop pods streaked toward the mining colony like deadly meteors, each one carrying 25 of the galaxy's most feared warriors. The tactical displays showed the inexorable advance of overwhelming force, perfectly coordinated and utterly unstoppable. First wave deployment successful, reported a Zephyrian instructor. Xerath forces establishing beachheads at primary access points. Human response appears chaotic. Indeed, the human defenders seemed to be running around the facility with no apparent coordination. They scattered in different directions, some heading for defensive positions while others disappeared into maintenance tunnels or industrial sections. To the alien observers, it looked like the panic and disorganization they had expected. Human casualties should begin registering within minutes, General Crixtan observed with satisfaction. But then something unexpected happened. The first Xerath patrol, a full squad of 25 warriors that had secured the main docking bay, simply vanished from the tactical display. "Communications error?" asked Commander Veltar, his upper right hand manipulating the display controls. "Negative, sir," replied the monitoring technician. "All systems functioning normally. Patrol designation Alpha 1 is showing as eliminated." A murmur of confusion rippled through the observation deck. The Xeraths were the galaxy's apex predators. A full squad did not simply disappear without some indication of combat. Then Patrol Alpha 2 went silent. Then Alpha 3. "What is happening down there?" Admiral Fluxera demanded, her form shifting through worried shades of purple. The tactical display switched to individual unit tracking, and the alien observers watched in growing bewilderment as red indicators representing Xerath forces began winking out of existence across the mining facility. Not in massive firefights or coordinated battles, but one squad at a time, scattered throughout the complex. "Perhaps the humans are using some form of electronic warfare?" suggested a Zephyrian cadet. But the internal sensors told a different story. The mining facility was transforming before their eyes into something that defied every principle of rational defense. Corridors that had been clear passages 10 minutes ago now registered as structural hazards. Industrial equipment was moving into positions that made no tactical sense. And somehow, impossibly, the humans were not just surviving the Xerath assault, they were winning. "Xerath forces are reporting equipment malfunctions," the monitoring technician announced, his voice carrying a note of professional confusion. "Gravity fluctuations in sections 7 through 12. Atmospheric irregularities in the main processing center. And sir, they are requesting immediate resupply." "Resupply?" Commander Veltar's 3 eyes blinked in rapid sequence. "The invasion began 15 minutes ago. How could they need resupply already?" The answer came in the form of thermal imaging from the facility's lower levels. A group of Xerath warriors was advancing through what appeared to be a maintenance tunnel when the walls suddenly came alive. Mining equipment, welding tools, and industrial cutters emerged from concealed positions like mechanical predators. The Xeraths fought back with their superior weapons and armor, but when the ambush ended, the thermal signatures showed something impossible. The humans were stripping weapons and equipment from the fallen Xeraths. "They are learning," whispered Admiral Fluxera, her color shifting to something the translation matrix identified as horrified fascination. "They are adapting their tactics in real time." In the simulation below, Marcus Kane's voice could be heard over the tactical communications channel, calm and conversational despite the chaos around him. "Nice plasma rifles, guys. Thanks for the upgrade." The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the mining colony's human defenders began using captured Xerath technology against its original owners. But they were not just copying Xerath tactics, they were improvising, combining alien weapons with human creativity in ways that made the monitoring computers throw error messages. Simulation time elapsed, 37 minutes. The AI announced, "Current casualties, Xerath forces, 8,412. Human forces, 0. Commander Veltar stared at the statistics display as if it had personally insulted his ancestors. That cannot be correct. But the numbers did not lie, and in the depths of mining colony Epsilon 7, the impossible was becoming routine. The simulation had been running for 2 hours when the nature of the conflict fundamentally shifted. What had begun as a Xerath invasion had transformed into something the alien observers had no tactical framework to understand. The hunters had become the hunted. Xerath Command is requesting immediate tactical reassessment, The monitoring technician reported, his voice carrying the bewildered tone of someone translating messages that made no logical sense. They are reporting that human defenders are anticipating their movements. On the tactical display, the alien observers watched a Xerath strike team advance through what appeared to be an empty corridor. The squad moved with textbook precision, their bio-armor gleaming under the facility's emergency lighting. But as they reached the midpoint of the passage, the walls erupted. Not with weapons or explosives, but with humans. 5 human defenders emerged from concealment points that should not have existed, moving with coordination that defied their supposed lack of hive mind communication. They struck with captured Xerath weapons, industrial tools, and what appeared to be mining charges configured as grenades. The engagement lasted exactly 43 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 25 Xerath warriors lay motionless, and the humans had vanished back into the facility's infrastructure like ghosts. How are they predicting Xerath movements? General Crix-Tan demanded, his mandibles clicking with mechanical frustration. The hive mind has analyzed 17 different tactical approaches, and the humans counter every single one. Commander Veltar manipulated the display to show a broader view of the facility. What he saw made his 3 eyes widen in something approaching horror. The mining colony no longer resembled any rational defensive structure. Corridors led nowhere. Gravity fields fluctuated according to patterns that made no sense. Atmospheric processors had been reprogrammed to create zones of toxic gas that appeared and disappeared with seemingly random timing. But it was not random. As the alien observers watched, they began to see the pattern. Every modification, every trap, every environmental hazard was designed around one principle: force the Xeraths to react predictably to unpredictable stimuli. They are not defending the facility, Admiral Flux Era whispered, her form shifting through colors that had no translation in any known language. They are using it as a weapon. In the simulation, Marcus Kane's voice crackled over the communications channel as his team prepared to spring another ambush. Xerath Patrol Delta approaching Junction 7. Remember, they always turn left when faced with atmospheric warnings. Jenny, trigger the gravity field on my mark. The alien observers watched in fascination and growing dread as the prediction proved accurate. The Xerath Patrol encountered the atmospheric warning, turned left exactly as anticipated, and walked directly into a gravity field that increased their weight by a factor of 5. While they struggled to move in the crushing field, human defenders appeared from above and eliminated the entire squad with methodical precision. Simulation time elapsed 3 hours, 14 minutes. The AI announced, current casualties, Xerath forces 28,637, human forces 0. The betting pool had long since fallen silent. Alien cadets who had wagered fortunes on quick human extinction now watched their certainties crumble along with Xerath tactical superiority. But the real shock came in Hour 4, when the Xerath forces attempted their final gambit. Recognizing that conventional tactics had failed catastrophically, they consolidated their remaining forces for a direct assault on the facility's central command center. 21,000 Xerath warriors, moving in perfect formation, supported by their heaviest weapons and most advanced armor. The attack should have succeeded through sheer overwhelming force. The humans had run out of tricks, run out of surprises, run out of luck. Instead, they ran out of Xeraths. The consolidated assault walked directly into the most elaborate trap in the history of warfare. The humans had spent 4 hours turning the entire central section of the mining facility into a single, massive elimination zone. Gravity fields, atmospheric processors, mining charges, industrial equipment, and captured Xerath weapons all triggered in a precisely choreographed sequence that lasted exactly 11 minutes and 17 seconds. When it ended, the thermal imaging showed a result that made several alien observers excuse themselves from the viewing deck. Final simulation statistics, the AI announced in its perfectly neutral voice. Total engagement time, 4 hours, 26 minutes, 11 seconds. Xerath casualties, 50,000. Human casualties, 2 minor injuries sustained during equipment operation. The observation deck had fallen into the kind of silence usually reserved for funeral services. Commander Veltar stared at the tactical display where 5 small blue dots representing human life signs moved casually through a facility that had become a graveyard for 50,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors. In the simulation chamber below, Marcus Kane's voice carried clearly through the speakers as he addressed his team. Well, that was fun. Anyone want to grab lunch before we reset the facility? I think the cafeteria survived the excitement. The casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans rather than the complete annihilation of an invasion force was perhaps the most unsettling sound the alien assembly had ever heard. Simulation complete. The AI announced, all parameters satisfied, requesting instructions for facility reset. Commander Veltar found his voice after several attempts. Reset the simulation chamber. As the 5 human cadets began to dematerialize from the virtual environment, Marcus Kane looked up at the observation deck and offered another cheerful wave to the stunned alien audience. His grin had not faded in the slightest. The observation deck remained frozen in tableau for a full minute after the simulation ended. 300 of the galaxy's finest military minds sat in complete silence, their advanced cognitive processes struggling to reconcile what they had witnessed with everything they thought they knew about warfare, tactics, and the natural order of the universe. Commander Veltar continued staring at the statistical display as if prolonged observation might somehow make the numbers change. 50,000 to 0. The mathematical impossibility hung in the air like a physical presence, demanding acknowledgement while defying comprehension. General Crix Tan was the first to speak, his voice carrying the mechanical confusion of a hive mind encountering data that refused to process correctly. Our tactical algorithms predicted human extinction within 17 minutes. The engagement lasted 4.5 hours. The variance is unprecedented. Several Aquari cadets had shifted to colors so pale they were nearly transparent, their forms rippling with what appeared to be existential crisis. A group of Zephyrian instructors huddled together, their multiple arms gesturing frantically as they attempted to reconstruct their understanding of military science from first principles. Perhaps, suggested a Cronite instructor with the desperate tone of someone grasping for rational explanations, the simulation parameters were incorrectly calibrated? The Xerath AI response patterns may have been suboptimal? Before anyone could respond, the doors to the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss. The 5 human cadets entered the room, their casual conversation carrying clearly across the stunned silence. I still say the gravity field trick in Section 12 was overkill, one of them was saying, howling sweat from her forehead with the matter-of-fact air of someone discussing a routine training exercise. Overkill? Marcus replied with obvious amusement. Jenny, we eliminated 3 entire battalions with that setup. If anything, it was efficient. Fair point, Jenny conceded. Though someone else gets to clean up the mess next time. Do you have any idea how long it takes to reset a facility after that much creative destruction? The aliens watched this exchange with the fascination of anthropologists observing an entirely unknown species. The contrast was jarring beyond comprehension, while the galaxy's military elite sat in shocked silence, trying to process the complete invalidation of their tactical understanding. The humans discussed the systematic annihilation of 50,000 Xerath warriors as if it were a minor inconvenience in their daily schedule. Commander Veltar finally found his voice, though it emerged as more of a croak than the authoritative tone he usually commanded. Cadet Kane, how? Marcus looked up from his conversation with genuine surprise, as if he had forgotten the alien observers were present. How what? Commander? How was this possible? Veltar gestured helplessly at the statistical display that still showed the impossible results. Our calculations, our tactical analysis, our mathematical models, they all predicted human extinction. Complete. Inevitable. Certain. Marcus followed his gaze to the display and nodded thoughtfully. Oh, that. Well, Commander, I think your problem was that you based all your calculations on a fundamental misunderstanding. Which was? Marcus's grin returned, carrying with it the patient amusement of a teacher addressing a particularly persistent misconception. You assumed that humans would fight like rational beings. Admiral Flux's era shifted through several shades of confused orange. Are you suggesting that irrationality is a military advantage? I am suggesting, Marcus replied, his tone becoming almost conversational, that when you corner a species that thinks impossible odds are just another word for interesting, you might want to recalculate your definition of rational. Marcus walked to the center of the observation deck, his casual movement drawing the attention of every alien in the room. He paused before the massive holographic display that still showed the mining colony scenario, its virtual corridors now silent after the impossible victory. You want to know what went wrong with your analysis? He asked, turning to face the assembled alien minds. You made one critical error that invalidated every calculation, every prediction, every tactical assessment you performed. Commander Veltar leaned forward, his three eyes focusing intently on the human. What error? You tried to understand human military doctrine using alien logic, Marcus said simply. You took your rational, mathematical, logical approach to warfare and assumed that humans would operate within the same parameters. You calculated our capabilities based on your limitations. He gestured toward the display showing Xerath combat statistics. When you analyzed this scenario, you looked at the numbers and concluded that 50,000 warriors with superior technology and centuries of combat experience would inevitably defeat 500 humans with mining equipment. Your mathematics were perfect. Your logic was flawless. Your understanding of warfare was absolutely correct. Marcus paused, his grin becoming almost predatory. For rational species. General Crixtan's mandibles clicked with confusion. Are you claiming that humans are not rational? Oh, we can be rational, Marcus replied cheerfully. When we are not backed into a corner, when our families are not threatened, when survival is not at stake. But the moment you present us with a situation where rationality suggests we should give up and die quietly, he shrugged. Well, that is when things get interesting. Admiral Flux's era rippled through shades of concerned purple. Explain interesting. Marcus began pacing again, his movements loose and relaxed, despite being the center of attention from hundreds of alien eyes. Humans have a concept we call controlled insanity. It is the ability to make decisions that are simultaneously completely irrational and tactically brilliant. We look at impossible odds and instead of calculating our chances of survival, we calculate how much damage we can do before we go down. He pointed to the simulation results. You saw chaos and assumed it was disorganization. But human chaos is not random, it is adaptive. We call it making it up as we go along, but what we are really doing is responding to changing conditions faster than any logical decision-making process could manage. A Zephyrian instructor raised one of his forearms. But this approach should result in catastrophic tactical failures. Chaos cannot consistently defeat order. Ah, but that is where you misunderstand the nature of human chaos, Marcus said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. We do not embrace chaos because we think it is tactically superior to order. We embrace it because it forces our enemies to try to think like us. The observation deck had grown very quiet. Even the translation devices seemed to be struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in most alien languages. Marcus continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining a fundamental truth about the universe. Every alien species in this room approaches warfare the same way. Analyze the situation, calculate optimal responses, implement logical solutions. You fight wars the way engineers solve problems. Methodically, rationally, efficiently. He spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire assembly. But humans fight wars the way artists create masterpieces. We take whatever materials we have available, we ignore conventional rules about how those materials should be used, and we create something that has never existed before. Commander Veltar shook his head slowly. This cannot be sustainable. Eventually, rational tactics must prevail over artistic improvisation. But would they? Marcus asked, his grin returning. Because here is the thing about human military doctrine that your analysis completely missed. We get better at being irrational the longer a conflict continues. What you call weaknesses, our emotional responses, our unpredictability, our refusal to accept logical defeat, those become our greatest strengths. He pointed back to the simulation display. You calculated that humans would be demoralized by casualties. Instead, casualties make us angry. You predicted that impossible odds would break our morale. Instead, impossible odds make us creative. You assumed that isolation and desperation would lead to surrender. Instead, they lead to spite. Admiral Flux's era shifted through colors that suggested deep contemplation. You are describing a species that becomes more dangerous as their situation becomes more hopeless. Now you are beginning to understand, Marcus said, his voice carrying genuine approval. Humans do not fight to win according to your definition of victory. We fight to ensure that anyone who threatens what we care about regrets the decision. Sometimes that results in our victory. Sometimes it results in mutual destruction. But it never, ever results in quiet surrender. He looked around the assembly, meeting alien eyes across the amphitheater. You have been preparing for wars against rational enemies who will behave predictably when faced with superior force. But if you ever find yourselves in conflict with humans, you will not be fighting a war. You will be trying to solve a puzzle that changes its rules every time you think you understand it. Marcus clapped his hands together with finality. And the most beautiful part? We will be laughing while we do it, because impossible situations are where humans have the most fun. The silence that followed was different from the stunned quiet after the simulation. This was the silence of minds fundamentally recalibrating their understanding of what warfare could be. Finally, Commander Veltar spoke, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect. Cadet Kane, I believe we may need to revise our tactical curriculum. Marcus's laugh echoed through the observation deck. Commander, I think you may need to revise your understanding of the universe. The formal session reconvened 3 days later, though the atmosphere in the Grand Assembly Hall had changed dramatically. Commander Veltar stood at the central podium, but his usual confidence had been replaced by something approaching humility. The holographic displays now showed revised tactical assessments, updated threat matrices, and completely restructured military doctrine classifications. After extensive review of recent simulation data, Veltar announced to the assembled delegates, the Galactic Military Academy formally revises its assessment of human military capabilities from limited tactical value to unquantifiable strategic asset. The revision sent ripples of conversation through the alien assembly. General Krix Tan rose from his position, his mechanical voice carrying a note of professional respect. The Kronite Military Collective requests immediate scheduling of joint training exercises with human forces. We wish to study adaptive tactical methodologies. Admiral Flux's era shifted through shades of eager blue. The Aquari Defense Fleet seconds this request. Our traditional approaches to conflict resolution may benefit from creative consultation. Similar requests began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Regelian War College wanted human instructors for their advanced strategy courses. The Centauri Defense Syndicate offered partnership agreements for tactical development. Even the notoriously independent vegan-free companies requested access to human military advisors. Commander Veltar turned his attention to the corner where Marcus Kane sat with his notebook, apparently oblivious to the revolution he had sparked. Cadet Kane, on behalf of 17 different military academies, I am authorized to offer you advanced instructorships, research positions, and command track appointments in any branch of galactic defense you prefer. Marcus looked up from his writing with genuine surprise. That is very generous, Commander, but I think I will have to decline. Decline? Veltar's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. May I ask why? Marcus gestured to his corner seat with obvious fondness. I prefer the observation position, sir. You learn much more about people when they think you are not paying attention. The assembled aliens exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to understand the implications of that statement. How long had Marcus been sitting in that corner, quietly taking notes, while superior civilizations revealed their tactical assumptions, strategic weaknesses, and military blind spots? Besides, Marcus continued with that familiar grin. Someone needs to keep an eye on things around here. Over the following weeks, the Academy settled into its new reality. Alien cadets who had once dismissed human military doctrine now studied historical human conflicts with the intensity of scholars examining sacred texts. Tactical simulations were revised to include unpredictability factors and creative adaptation variables. The betting pools now included odds on which species would make the next request for human military consultation. And in his corner seat, Marcus Kane continued taking notes. The current debate focused on the military limitations of the newly contacted Helix Nebula Confederacy, and whose crystalline-based warriors were considered invulnerable due to their silicon carbide exoskeletons and quantum-link battle coordination. The alien assembly was already calculating invasion scenarios and defensive strategies with the confidence of superior minds addressing an obvious tactical situation. Marcus looked up from his notebook, pen poised over a fresh page, and watched the familiar pattern unfold. The same logical assumptions, the same mathematical certainties, and the same complete failure to consider that different species might not fight according to galactic standard protocols. His shoulders began to shake slightly. In the grand scheme of the galaxy, there were many dangerous things. Black holes that could devour star systems, quantum storms that could tear apart the fabric of space itself, ancient alien artifacts that could reshape reality according to incomprehensible purposes. But perhaps the most dangerous thing of all was a human sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes and trying very hard not to laugh at what was about to happen next. Marcus made another small notation in his notebook and settled back to watch the show. After all, impossible situations were where humans had the most fun.